Hey, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the paddock. It is race week. After a long summer break, it is finally here. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the Monza GP, the home race for Ferrari. We can't wait to make our bets on this weekend's podium finish. On the episode, we have Amy, Edo, Chelsea, and myself, Hannah. And I'm going to pass it off to Edo, who is going to give us a little lesson on the GP's history.
The Italian GP, held at the historic Monza circuit, boasts a rich and storied history in the world of Formula One racing. The event's origins trace back to the inaugural Formula One World Championship season of 1950, making it one of the longest-running races on the F1 calendar, only really matched in terms of prestige and history by Monaco, if you ask me. Monza's high-speed 5.93 kilometer, aka 3.6 mile long, and 53-lap layout is characterized by long straights and iconic banking corners, and has consistently provided a thrilling spectacle for fans and a challenge for drivers. It is not named the Temple of Speed for nothing. Over the decades, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza has witnessed some of the sport's most memorable moments on track as well as off track. The track blends a unique need for speed as well as technical demands and has favored legendary drivers and powerhouse teams. The 1960s saw the dominance of Ferrari, with drivers like Phil Hill, John Surtees, and the beloved Tazio Novellari, showcasing their skill on home soil. However, it was in the 2000s where Michael Schumacher and Ferrari entered a period of remarkable success, capturing numerous victories and titles in front of the passionate tifosi, aka Italian Ferrari fans, who adorned the grandstands in their iconic red color. Throughout its history, the Italian Grand Prix has been a focal point of Formula One's calendar, celebrated for its heritage, speed, passionate atmosphere, and even some conspiracies. The circuit's unique combination of history and modernity has allowed it to evolve and remain relevant in an ever-changing sport. As Monza continues to host thrilling races, its status as a beloved and iconic venue in the world of motorsport remains unwavering. As I hinted, Monza is one for the record books. After all, it has been held an eye-watering 92 times since 1921, both as part of the F1 calendar and before. So why not talk about some of the records established at this circuit? In terms of lap records, for the current layout, we have Rubens Barrichello bringing it home with an amazing 1 minute 21.046 seconds. And now I know that name might not ring a bell for a lot of people, though he's definitely worth a Google, but that is because he hasn't been on the grid for a hot minute, since 2011 to be exact. And the record was set at the peak of his time with Ferrari almost 20 years ago in 2004, making it the longest standing lap record in F1. In terms of most wins, we have the usual suspects of Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton with 5 wins each, with Lewis also taking the lead in terms of pole positions with 7. He and his idol, Ayrton Senna, are also the only 2 drivers that have ever had a Grand Slam at the circuit, which is impressive as the GP has been held every year that F1 has existed except for 1980. It being Ferrari's home race, it would, of course, be stupid of me not to mention them. After all, they are the constructor with the most wins at this circuit with 19. Charles Leclerc delivering the last one in 2019. And who could forget the iconic line, "He won in Spa, he wins in Monza," by Sky commentator David Croft that year. Now, I could go on for hours about the records at Monza, but I won't. Though I do have one last one to share before we dive into last year's race. That one is that at Monza, we've seen the closest race finish ever with a margin of 0.01 seconds. And this was done in 1971 by Peter Gettin, who, coincidentally, is also the only winner to win at the Temple of Speed while starting outside of the top 10.
Now, while we could talk history as much as we wanted to, I do want to touch on last year's race, starting with last year's practice sessions. So I'm going to just give some highlights and cover the top 10 for each session. And one thing that I do want everybody to keep in mind when we're talking about last year's race weekend is that going into the weekend, Max already had a 5-place grid penalty because he took a new combustion engine. So that was an automatic. He was going to get a 5-place penalty no matter where he qualified. Now, in FP1, we saw Red Bull's rear wing bouncing issues back again for Checo. I don't know why it just seemed to affect Checo, but it really wasn't an issue for Max during FP1 at least. AlphaTauri had issues with their rear axle of the car and was called into the garage. Porpoising issues during this race honestly just made me giggle because they were so bad. You could hear it, you could see it. It was just in your face with the porpoising. This was the free practice that we saw Nick take Sebastian Vettel's place at Aston Martin, and then we had Antonio Giovinazzi in mixed place at Haas for that P1 that a rookie has to drive every year. Now, for your top 10, it goes as follows. P1 was Charles, P2 was Carlos, P3 was George, P4 was Lewis, P5 was Max, P6 was Esteban Ocon, P7 was Fernando, P8 was Yuki, P9 was Valtteri, and P10 was everybody's favorite, Daniel Ricciardo. I saw you with that little dance hand. Now, in FB2, we saw a lot of lockups in practice, from Mick to Max to Charles. It was just everybody seemed to have issues with lockups. We also saw a lot of issues for anybody who had a Ferrari power unit. Or it was also just a hydraulics issue for anybody with a Ferrari power unit. Now, rewatching this practice and seeing all of the Mercedes issues honestly really hurt my heart. They just really hadn't figured out that car quite yet. Now, our top 10 is as follows. All right, in P1, we had Carlos. P2, we had Max. P3 was Charles. P4 was Lando. P5 was George. P6 was Checo. P7 was Lewis. P8 was Esteban. P9 was Fernando. And rounding us out in P10 was Alex Albon. Now, for FP3, it was announced that Alex would actually be sitting out due to appendicitis and Nick would be driving in his place. FP3, Checo was still plagued by the bouncing rear wing and DRS issues that never seemed to impact Max. Now, our top 10 is kind of your usual host of characters. P1 was Max, P2 was Charles, P3 was Checo, P4 was Carlos, P5 was Fernando, P6 was Lando, P7 was George, P8 was Yuki, P9 was Esteban, and rounding us out in P10 was Lewis. Now, let's move on to one of my favorite days of any race weekend, and that is quali.
It was an exciting quali for the Ferrari fans as we watched Charles and Carlos both gain top 3 positions. We saw Charles in P1 and Carlos in P3. But of course, nothing can be easy for us, so we saw Carlos, as well as Max, who was in P2, be pushed down due to grid penalties, leaving Carlos in 18th place and Max in 7th. The new top 3 consisted of Charles, still in P1, George, who moved up to P2, and Lando in P3. Now, the starting grid in general was disturbingly just filled with penalties, so I'm just going to go into them real quick before we cover the race day. Esteban Ocon, 5 places. Sergio Perez, 10 places. Mick Schumacher, 15 places. Valtteri Bottas, 15 places. Kevin Magnussen, 15 places. Lewis Hamilton, back of the grid, and Yuki Tsunoda, back of the grid. Now, with that beautiful starting grid, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Hannah, who's going to cover the race day.
So, I'm going to be frankly honest with y'all. I'm going to try to condense this race day as much as possible because it is filled with a lot of excitement. So, the 2022 Italian GP began with a solemn moment of silence to mark the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Drivers and team members lined up in the pit lane to pay their respects, so RIP. But let's go into race day. Let's talk about the excitement. So, like Chelsea mentioned, there were many penalties, which makes the start of this race quite interesting. And I just want to say, when the lights out were going, George had a phenomenal launch at the beginning of the race. If anybody's seen that, just notice that. In the first lap, though, Max Verstappen ended up working his way, passing 3 people. And by lap 2, he was in the top 3. DRS really was his best friend. So now here are some quick facts about the race. Sergio Perez brakes overheated and caught flames, and since it was super hot in Monza, there wasn't much anybody could do about it. This is when you really wish it was raining outside. Ferrari had different strategies, but here's the interesting thing. If you look back at like 2022 versus like 2023, they asked the drivers their point of view versus, and now they don't really do that. And then finally, Aston Martin's car actually ended up having a power issue. Poor Sebastian Vettel. Power units suck. Let's just be honest. Now, Max had hopes to have a huge margin of victory, but that was squashed quickly when Daniel Ricciardo came to a halt ahead of the second Lesmo, which is a corner, on lap 47, triggering the safety car, allowing the top 4 to actually end up stopping for soft tires. So Sainz taking new softs, while Verstappen, Leclerc, and Russell had to take scrub softs, which are gently used tires, in anticipation of a restart. However, the field only lined up behind the safety car on lap 51 and 53. A number of lap cars got intermixed in those with the lead lap, and it soon became clear that the race would end under caution. With that, Verstappen took the checker flag with a slim lead over Leclerc, but in reality, the Dutchman seemed on course for the first ever Italian GP win after the pit stops had ended up taking their course. Leclerc was furious that the race didn't restart, and the fans weren't particularly happy either, but Ferrari was said to honestly be beaten by the pace alone. The safety car procedure following Ricardo's retirement drew a lot of scrutiny, with discussions surrounding the decision actually taken. After it turned out that marshals could not move the car quickly, the incident caused the race to end under a safety car. Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, and many teams actually expressed their frustration over the safety car race ending, which is not a normal thing. Let's just put that out there. Max Verstappen, though, ended up winning the 2022 Italian GP under said safety car, which was his first time, with pole sitter Charles Leclerc finishing runner-up, and Red Bull denied Ferrari a home victory at Monza. What the heck? And George Russell came in third. So Mercedes bounced back. Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton completed strong recovery drives from the back of the grid en route to 4th and 5th, with the other Red Bulls of Sergio Perez completing the top 6 and claiming the fastest lap to obtain a bonus point. I will just say that if you haven't watched a race from the 2022 season, I would highly suggest the Monza GP because it brought a lot of craziness in it. And it's ultimately like the fastest track that Formula One drives on. So if you haven't seen it, please take the time to go watch it. Now, let's talk about what we think the coming week's going to bring with our lovely predictions.
As you know, if you have been listening to us for a while, I tend to pull out my trusty 20-sided die when it comes to predictions. As I, on one hand, don't want to jinx anything, but also I want to spice things up. So let's see what it has to say this week. P1, Sergio Perez. I guess this means Sebastian Vettel's record of 9 wins in a row while being equaled will not be broken. And the Monza curse kind of lives on to see another day. P2, Yuki-san. Out of left field, I must admit, but I wouldn't be mad about it. P3, Lando. Another podium for Lando? Let's hope he doesn't break any trophies this time. The Hungary one just got fixed after all. As for the rest of the top 10, we have Lewis, Oscar, Carlos, Zhou, Nico, Max, and Esteban. While these results do seem plausible, my Tifosi heart still wishes for both Ferraris to end up in the points.
So obviously I had to pull out my pendulum for my predictions per usual. I always love Monza and I really cannot wait to see how this weekend actually shakes out in reality. I actually am going to see our amazing producer Leanne this weekend, and I'm super excited because it means that I have somebody to actually watch the race with. Normally doesn't happen for me. Even though we root for different teams, it'll still be a blast. So keep an eye out on our social medias for a little bit of some behind the scenes content. I can already feel the weird Ferrari strat calls coming this weekend. Maybe some power unit reliability issues. I really don't want to put that out into the universe, but like something in my gut just tells me that it's coming. Now, for P1, it looks like we're getting another Pierre podium, and I honestly won't complain about that one bit. Especially getting to see him pull out a P1 worthy race, that would just be fantastic. And it's another Monza win for him? Yes, please. He always sounds so elated when he wins, and I would really like to hear that again because it just gives me some goosebumps. Now for P2, it looks like we're getting a double Alpine podium and another SD Bestie on the podium, baby. And I really am not even going to complain. It really looks like my pendulum just wants to see Esteban do well, and I do too, honestly. Now, P3 for me is something that I would have never seen coming, but I think everybody needs to see again because I, for one, have missed seeing this person on the podium, and that is the Mullet King himself, Valtteri Bottas. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but I'm here for it, and I will happily manifest the hell out of that. Now, for the rest of the top 10, it goes as follows for my pendulum. P4 is Fernando, P5 is Lance, P6 is Checo, P7 is Yuki, P8 is Lando, P9 is Oscar, and P10 is Logan Sargent. I know. We're getting a Sargent in the points. Again, will it happen? I don't know. We'll find out. It is apparently the last track that he really knows super well, this section of the calendar, and until the end of the season. So I'm just interested to see how he does at Monza and how he does the rest of the season on new tracks to him. Now, I did decide to get a little bit special and do fastest lap and driver of the day with my pendulum, which I normally don't do. Fastest lap goes to Fernando Alonso, which doesn't seem super surprising to me. He's got a car that's got some pace and he's got the talent, so it's very plausible. Driver of the day, and that is Yuki Tsunoda. I think somebody who very much so deserves driver of the day, even when he's not in the points. He's just really been improving a lot this season, and it's so nice to see.
So I'm going to do a mix of probably actual and then my wish list top 3/4, lol. But it all depends on the recovery of Danny Rick himself because nothing has been officially released. I'm praying for a good recovery and a quick one. So the actual would be Max Verstappen in P1, then my lovely Charles Leclerc in P2, and Fernando Alonso in P3. But I could also envision a Mercedes, so like a Lewis or George, but who knows? We might see. So, who I really want to win though would be Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, and Carlos Sainz. I don't care P1 or P3, just somebody there. And or Daniel Ricciardo himself if he comes back and gets to race. Because, I mean, it is Ferrari's home race, so why not get the Ferrari boys on the podium? But I couldn't leave out my favorite Englishman, Lando. I hope with it being Ferrari's home race, we have good strategy from them. Like, just good, solid pit stops and maybe a good race strategy and or maybe they on the same race strategy instead of like different race strategies on different like ideas and all that. But we won't go down into that hole because I could talk all day. But I am looking forward to this weekend's race and seeing how everything turns out because I did not do a top 10 like my lovely ladies up there. And I just love the atmosphere of Monza. And with both Charles and Carlos, pray to Lord on the podium, I can just imagine what that podium looks like in my head, and it would be a dream come true. So let's see what the weekend brings. And I'm going to knock on wood right now that hope everything comes true.
Hello, it's me. As this is our home race, Ferrari boys are obviously, gonna get podium in my head. But let's go ahead, we'll bring my crystal ball out. We'll see what guesses I made. So really, I was thinking about it. I kind of want to get like a little 8-ball, the ones that you shake that say yes and no for this. So I'm going to be on the lookout for that. But anyways, for my top 3, I went completely realistic. I put Max at P1, I put Charles at P2, and I put Lewis at P3. I don't know why. I'm just hoping it works out. I want chaos, okay? I want no reason for the podium winners. I want a set of podium winners I can be proud to gossip about because, of course, I'm hoping for like a nice clean race, even though I'm pretty sure it's safe to predict some wet weather. I just want something interesting. Last year, we saw Max get his first win like ever in Monza, So I'm afraid he will be a 2-time winner there. Just a vibe. And Charles obviously has gotten this in the past, so I think he has a real chance of getting another podium here. And in my head, same for Lewis. Also, this time last year, we were having the same conversation we are now, which is this weekend's race going to be another winning one for Max so that we can title him winner in Singapore? And I am very sad as a Ferrari fan to say yes, my friends. I think I can predict that too. But speaking of our Ferrari boys, there's some talk that we just really need to talk about, and that is their adorable, amazing, good-looking outfits. I'm sorry, friends. That is some really nice suits. Does it remind me a little bit of the gas station shell? Yeah, but you know what? They pull it off really nicely.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, honestly, looking at these suits, I've heard everything from McDonald's to gorgeous. So, and honestly, as a delusional Ferrari girly, I'm gonna go with the latter because they are gorgeous and they're two gorgeous men. Sorry, had to say it. So they can pull off anything. I mean, they pulled off the yellow too last year. So why not this one this year? And it gives a nice retro vibe. So yay.
I'm just going to go with what Edo said and just say that the livery and the race suits are chef's kiss. So please continue, Ferrari, with more of this because I am absolutely obsessed. And just the red and gold, or I'm going to go with gold. I know it's yellow, but I'm going to go with gold with a touch of black. But I will say, I wish their fireproofs underneath were black to offset it, and just black looks good. Like, sorry, excuse my French, but hot damn.
I think everybody can agree that like black fireproofs look good on everybody. I don't care who you are. I have to touch on the helmets that these boys came up with for this weekend. One that Charles put out that says "One Dream, One Team" on the top just gives me the warm fuzzies. I do like the race suits a lot more than last year's full yellow. It, for me, really was giving the Charles in a banana suit vibes. I mean, I looked at the pictures and the only thing I could hear is, "Oh my God, I've never looked so good." His streams. And it just, I couldn't help it. Every time they popped up in the suits, I'm like, it's giving the banana suit meets Minion. And I didn't love it. This one I do like. It's not my personal favorite, but it's definitely an upgrade from last year. And the livery on the car looks fantastic.
And honestly, just to keep this conversation going, focused on Ferrari, which, as a fan, I'm being very biased right now. I want to talk about the new 2024 car that Ferrari is expecting to come out with on the grid next year, only because Charles and Ferrari just said, and I quote, "Next year's car will not be an evolution of this year's car. This year's car has been compared to last year's car, but it's going to be brand new. A different chassis with different design, different rear end to allow our aero department to better develop the car to achieve their targets." So obviously, as a Ferrari fan, I am so hoping we have a better season next year, because I know we say that every year, but maybe a new car.
I think we have Fred Vasseur to thank for that move. Honestly, that just feels like he is trying to get his fingers in everything, and I love it. Because in my personal opinion, I think so many things that man touches just end up turning to gold somehow.
I mean, honestly, if you look back at his time at Alfa Romeo, before his time, they didn't have a good structure in place. Their wind tunnel was out of date, etc. And he turned it around very quickly, like within 2 years. And I hope he does the same thing for Ferrari, because as I and a few other girls on the pod have been saying, 2023's car was basically still Mattia Binotto's car. Fred didn't start with the team until January, so let's hope when he actually gets a full year with the team, they will have a better car.
Now, if we're going to talk Monza liveries, we also have to touch on the Alfa Romeo livery that they dropped for this weekend. It is so Italian and so in your face. And as an Italian American, it makes my heart so happy to just see it. Like, having the Italian flag colors on a car is exactly what I was really hoping that somebody was going to give me somehow this weekend. And Alpha just decided to smack me in the face with it. I have not seen anything about the race suits. The car looks good, y'all.
I will say that I don't remember a livery in the last couple years that has had the Italian flag on it, or the Italian colors were like an Italy GP. And so I'm super excited to see this. I wish that at some of the other GPs that have an iconic or even just a beautiful color scheme of flags, that they did it more often, because it symbolizes the importance of that race. Give it to me.
Isn't someone doing the American flag for Coda? It's either Williams or it was Red Bull. One of them is doing it. I was seeing something about the liveries.
I think it's Red Bull, and I think it is a fan designed car. They were taking submissions the last few months, and it's a fan designed car, which I think is super cool. I love when teams do that, but I am a little disappointed that it took Alfa Romeo to give us an Italian flag in a car and not Ferrari.
Yes, it is a Red Bull car that is doing a flag USGP livery, and super excited about that. It makes me wish that Danny was driving the car even more, because Danny absolutely loves the US. But I just wish that they did it more. It would be amazing. Please, if you learn anything from the Italy GP, like flag, please do it more.
Now, if you don't follow the drivers on Instagram, particularly Alex Albon, may I suggest that you go check out his Instagram because he just posted some photos of himself, George, Lando, and Max from their time playing paddleball. It just looks like the boys had so much fun. They were out in Monaco, and it just seems like they let off some steam and also kind of got some cardio in before heading into the race weekend. And it just looks like they had so much fun together. Now, I do want to do almost like a little F1 news roundup going into this race weekend for people who maybe don't follow the teams online or aren't on Twitter, because that's where I get most of my Formula One news personally, is just all of the Twitter accounts. All right, so let's get into this news roundup. So Felipe Drogovic will be taking Lance Stroll's spot for Free Practice 1 this weekend as part of the F1 Young Driver outings. I, for one, really cannot wait to see how he does. I wish they let him take Fernando's spot because I would love to be able to see a head-to-head comparison of Felipe and Lance just to really see how they stack up against each other. I do think we will be seeing Felipe and other FP1 sessions as he is the only Aston Martin team member who doesn't have Formula One experience. I did see some tweets that confirmed that Carlos Sainz Sr. has given an interview where he confirms that Audi has at least reached out to Carlos Jr. about potential opportunities for the future. It is looking like everyone's favorite honey badger, Daniel Ricciardo, will be back by Qatar, potentially. It does look like he's eyeing earlier return for the Japan GP, but it does not look like we are going to see him race in Monza this weekend. I know I am heartbroken about it. I definitely know Hannah is too because that is our boy. But we will see him back soon.
Honestly, I'm just going to say I am so sad to see or hear that Danny might not be there for Monza because I feel like Monza is such like an iconic race to race at that for him to not be there and him only getting to race one time since his return, he deserves so much more.
I won't disagree with you there, Han. I really, really won't. We will be seeing the same qualifying format that we saw in Hungary earlier in the year, where Q1 they will use hard tires, Q2 will be mediums, and Q3 will be softs. It should be interesting, especially if we have cooler temperatures this weekend. If we do, I might suggest that you keep an eye on Mercedes and McLaren because I think that could be an interesting weekend for them. I did find a little bit of a fun fact during the week because we love our fun facts over at PGP. It's just kind of our thing. So far this season, we have had 9 different drivers on the podium, which I think is really interesting because it's not that many drivers.
What's crazy is the 3 teams that have 2 drivers up there because it's Red Bull, obviously, right? We don't think anything of that. Mercedes, cool. Alpine. Alpine is the 3rd team that's had both drivers get up there. Out of all of the other teams, it's only been those 3, with both drivers getting podium this season. How did Alpine get up there?
Well, it's because Esteban had his podium earlier in the season, and then Pierre literally just had his. I would love to look at the stats of how many drivers have had a 1, or how many teams have had a 1-2 so far this season, because I think that number is a lot smaller.
I mean, it's only Red Bull that has had a 1-2, because only Red Bull has won a race so far.
So, yeah, and it's actually kind of crazy to hear that Alpine has had both drivers on the podium this year because to date, Alpine's been one of like the backfield or middle field teams, and they're really proving themselves to be more of a front runner team. And to see that, it makes me wonder if there's more to them that we could see coming into the rest of the season.
So I usually don't do these, but this week I wanted to end the episode with a team principal quote because I was listening to a podcast, Beyond the Grid. You guys should check it out. And guess who we were speaking with? Fred, team principal from Ferrari. So I wanted to share his quote that he wanted to share with all of the Ferrari fans. This is it. And all over the world, half of the people are Ferrari fans. It's magical. And I would be delighted to win for them, to thank them for all the support during these years without titles. So with that, good luck this weekend to the Ferrari team for their home race. And of course, good luck to everyone else too.
I, for one, am looking forward to seeing Fred at Monza. That's just because I'm a Fred fan. I'm so excited to be back in Italy this weekend, at least mentally. What are your predictions? Let us know on our socials. Everywhere we are Paddock Girls Podcast, except on Twitter. There you can find us at Paddock Girls Pod. As always, don't forget to rate, review, and share the podcast wherever you listen. At Apple, Spotify, and now even on TikTok. Thanks for joining us in the paddock today. See you after the race. Bye, Craig.
See ya, Craig.
See you, Craig.
And goodbye, Gregory.